Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Empowered with Gina podcast. So, you are who you hang out with. And I'm so proud to say that I am surrounded by a network of powerful, beautiful, empowered women who are also extremely smart. So, today's guest is Doctora Mirella Diaz-Santos, assistant professor at UCLA Department School of Neurology. I'm just so proud to say that.
Thank you, gracias.
Doctora, bienvenido, welcome.
Muchas gracias por tenerme.
Thank you. So I always start saying, with my guests, I always ask 3 adjectives to describe you. How do you describe yourself? 3 words.
Persistent.
Yes.
Courageous. And I don't take no for an answer. I know that that's not a word.
It's okay.
But yes.
That's all right. It works. We get it. We know what that means. Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in Puerto Rico.
Okay. Where?
Canóvana, Loíza, so the northeast area of the island. Oldest of 4 women.
Okay.
And the typical story, my parents met when they were young. They married at 20, 21, and they had me really young as well.
Okay.
So I grew up with family income of 1.
Wow.
Public schools.
In Puerto Rico?
Everything in
Really?
Puerto Rico.
Okay. And then so tell me, as a little girl, how long were you there? How long did you stay?
So I was there until age 22.
Oh,
so
my gosh.
I did elementary school all through college in la Universidad de Puerto Rico in the capital, San Juan. Degree, bachelor's in psychology. So I was born and raised in Puerto Rico. So I represent my island every day.
Oh my gosh, I love that. When you were a little girl, did you know you wanted to get into the sciences, health? Did you know you wanted to get into medicine?
Not really at all. In my family, I'm the first one in the family with a higher degree, post bachelor's. So it wasn't, I didn't have a representation of what I could be. I just knew that I was meant for more. I just didn't know what it was.
Interesting. When did you find out what it was?
In high school.
Okay.
So in high school, I completed those, attitude tests that everyone has to complete. So I find your passion with a multiple choice exam.
I remember those.
And he said that I had an aptitude for psychology. And I actually love talking about mental health, mostly in our communities and the stigma and all the underdiagnosed mental health disorders that we have. So in high school, I was in a math and science program.
Okay.
And this is where I fell in love with the research questions from biology, chemistry, a little bit of physics. And I was really good with chemistry until I did a lab in a university as a high school student. And I hated it because you have no human interaction. It's only a lab.
Interesting. And so you're like, this is interesting, but I don't like it because I can't talk to anyone.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So then what do you do with that after high school? You now know you're interested in the science, medicine. What were you thinking?
Yeah. So when I got into La Universidad de Puerto Rico for my bachelor's, I chose psychology.
Okay.
But I was navigating it with all the support that my parents could provide, but they couldn't help me the way that I needed them to be because they didn't have the background. So I'm a book person. I will be in a library. So it will be home, library, maybe. So la biblioteca. And this is where I learned more about, so in psychology, what is it that you need? Just reading a booklet that a counselor will give you. And at that time, I learned that in Puerto Rico, at that time, the psychology degree meant nothing unless you had a PhD.
Okay.
So right there when I was 17, 18, I knew that if I wanted to do a career in psychology, I needed to do a PhD program.
Okay.
Right. And then I have a midlife crisis when I was in 20.
Okay.
Just because at that time, psychology meant Sigmund Freud, psychoanalysis, and with all due respect, I didn't like it.
Okay.
I didn't like it at all.
Why?
Because and I had that conversation with my dad. It's like me, 20, in the living room having this like
Meltdown.
I was like, I don't want to be this professional that just has a client, like, the image that you have, like the therapist is here,
Yeah.
and then you have your client that is like,
on the couch.
On the couch looking up and just telling you everything. And then you're making this emphasis about childhood and mother relationships and all that. It's like, I can't do that.
Okay.
I'm a good therapist, but I cannot see myself doing that in and out. But during that time, we as a family were dealing and managing my grandmother's disease that she was diagnosed with something called Alzheimer's. And she got a cognitive test or a test in primary care, got the diagnosis on her own. So that's not standard of care.
No.
So que en paz descanse. She's a proud woman. Therefore, she didn't say anything.
So she had the diagnosis, but didn't hid it because she was embarrassed. She was the pride.
Right, absolutely. Like when they're talking about Alzheimer's, like the word dementia comes into the conversation. Dementia means so many negative, has so many negative connotations that of course anyone will hide it, right? So she did until she was starting to get lost in public transportation. And that's key for her because she knew public transportation as the back of her hand. So this is where I combine my passion for mental health to understanding how is it that a brain disease can consume it at the point that your loved one deteriorates and you don't recognize them anymore.
Wow. Okay, so you have this midlife situation at 20, but at the same time, your grandma's going through this. So it kind of all gelled together and put you on the path. Did you pursue the PhD at that point?
Yeah, so at that point, I was able to secure a research internship in Puerto Rico. And that program, it was a 2-year program with a stipend, which was very well received. And that also allowed me to do research on campus and summer internships in the United States.
Okay.
So I went through that path of investigation, and then I found the field of neuropsychology, which combines brain and psychology all together. And this is where my journey began, where I understood neuropsychology in the early 2000s. It was non-existent in Puerto Rico. Okay. So this is how I knew that in order to follow this path, I had to leave my family, my island, my culture, my language, and go and come to the United States at age 22.
Okay. And that's important because a lot of people have big dreams and aspirations, and it's the fear of making big, significant moves like that, similar to you, whatever it is for them, but similar, there's a big life-changing event that will happen if you pursue your dream. You very much, I'm sure, could have been like, well, I'm sure you probably thought of every other way you could have stayed on that island. Probably. You want to be near your family, obviously. You want to be with your friends, your community, what you know. What motivated you to go?
Possibilities of staying the island, they ran out.
Okay.
Because obviously, I'm the oldest of 4. My whole family's there. No one is in the States. And I'm like, why am I going to do this? So then I started looking for jobs. I wanted to do a master in public health, jobs in the field, and nothing was clicking. The masters it wasn't accepted. Wow. The jobs were like no consistently. And what I encountered was I was a server at Chili's.
Really?
I did.
With this degree? With
a bachelor's degree, yes. So a bachelor's at Chili's in Canóvanas. And this is still there. So in that made me come through the fear and be like, you either stay here and you know what's going to be the outcome, or you just take a leap of faith
Wow.
at this age. And then I was like, okay, we're moving. I applied to grad school. I applied to only 4 because I didn't have the money. We come from very small, like limited resources, really good home, but a household of 6 with an income of 50 grand.
Jesus. Okay.
So it's like, okay.
4 schools. What schools did you apply to?
So I applied to University of Florida. I applied to Boston University. And I think I applied to 2 other more schools in Florida because I have my maternal aunt and cousins there.
Oh,
So
okay.
it was like a nice transition.
Somebody was there. Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like I have family, and it ended up that the Florida schools did not accept me, but I got accepted in Boston University.
Boston.
So I went to Boston.
Get out. That is very different from Puerto Rico. What on earth? So tell me, you're there.
It was painful.
Okay.
It was really, really painful because I have had like almost 20 years to reflect.
You're still reflecting.
I was like to reflect and realizing, the movies that I was watching back in Puerto Rico, the Fenway Park is there. And it's like, so this is actually real places, right? It's
not Hollywood sets.
It's like, exactly. So, and it was challenging because, unfortunately, this is where the society societies let me know that I am a minority.
How?
And I'm biracial, so people look at me and they think that I'm only Black, right? So I'm Black, white. So this is where I learned that Puerto Ricans have a really bad reputation. And they were like imposing all those stereotypes to me of being lazy, of being government, that we are depending on the government. And granted, I understand it now from a structural component because we don't understand fully the history of Puerto Rico. But at age 22, I'm just here following my dreams and my passion to find the answer of what took my grandmother away. And I get confronted with why you're here. You don't even speak English. I don't understand your accent. Same thing, like racial profiling, getting like pursued by cops in different streets, being told in grad school, are you sure you want to be here? And granted, I went from all Spanish to all English.
Oh my gosh. So not only are you in a new state, city, environment, seasons, people that don't look like you, but you don't even speak English fully?
So at that time, like Puerto Rico does have a bilingual education, so I was able to understand and read better than communicate.
Got it. Okay.
Right? So then my accent will come in. And I still have it.
At what point then, because that's a lot, because that in and of itself, just moving somewhere new, that's a lot. But then coming up against, which was surprising for you, all of these stereotypes, the racial profiling. Did you have a point where you're like, I'm out of here, I'm done, I can't handle this?
Thankfully, at that time, I did have a partner that was with me in Puerto Rico and moved with me to Boston. So I had a little bit, un granito of
You had
home,
someone.
right?
Yeah.
I never thought it because I fought so hard to get there. That being said, my mental health took a huge hit.
Oh, I can imagine.
So I was trying to survive grad school, being told that I should reconsider if that was the path that I wanted to take. I had a very supportive mentor, but we're talking about a full faculty, and none of them are Latinos. None of them are of color. There's like all are
really
white faculty.
Okay.
White non-Hispanics.
Got
right?
it.
So I pushed through without understanding that I was meeting the diagnosis of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, insomnia while in grad school, trying to push through and not letting these individuals tell me that I cannot do something.
Jesus.
That was the part was hard. And I was able to,
How many years did you go through that?
I want to say by the third year of grad
Jesus.
school, and it was 6 years. By the third year, I was able to find my identity, find my comunidad, because the salsa scene in Boston is huge. I was like,
What
thank
the?
you. Absolutely, yes.
Wow.
So I was able to
Now
find
we
them.
know.
Yes, the salsa scene, bachata scene, they are on point.
Wow. Okay, Boston.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So found them. It's like, okay, I can speak Spanish. I have my culture. The grants are coming in. People are just like kind of like letting me do my thing because
they realized you weren't leaving. So
right. And I was
can't get rid of her.
And I was getting the grants and I was getting the money as a
Ooh.
grad student. So I was like, oh, so you
Oh.
actually have what it takes. And that's kind of like the one aspect of my career that they look at me, they hear my accent, right? I speak very humble. Like if you want me to be very sure, I can code switch.
Sure.
But this is who I am. But because of the standards of what a doctor should look like,
Don't look like you.
a professional should move and walk and the hair, like none
no
of
hoops.
this.
No hoops.
None of this should be there.
I know.
So people are going to assume that you don't have what it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. You can't possibly be that smart. You can't possibly diagnose and treat and actually understand this stuff.
Right.
I know it. Okay, so let's fast forward to today.
Yes.
How the heck did you get to UCLA, which is one of the most prestigious schools in the country, as an assistant professor?
And I didn't know that either.
What?
No. I didn't know what Boston University meant until I got there. I was like, oh,
Ivy League.
No wonder people were giving me the side eye when I was like, oh, yeah, I'm going to Boston University. And they were like, are you sure you're not going to Boston College?
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, no. So when I got accepted to UCLA, I didn't know how big the university was either.
That's so funny.
All I knew is that I have what propelled me to move from my island was what propelled me to move across the state to come to UCLA. Because it was 2015. And at that time, UCLA had the only program in cultural neuropsychology that specialized in the Latino, Latina, Hispanic communities in Southern California.
Which is exactly what your whole goal was.
Exactly.
So it was called the Cultural
Neuropsychology program. At that time, it was initiative because it was smaller.
It just in the Southern California region.
At the time. It was the only program at the time in the country.
Jesus. Okay.
Right. Because what we encounter, and unfortunately we still do, is that there's a mismatch between communities, the PhD students that want to serve communities and who's in professorship and leadership. Therefore, you actually don't get good training because you're used as the translator, as interpreter, and you don't get the mentorship and the evidence-based practices. So there's no scientific rigor at that time.
Got it.
But UCLA had it. So I made my moves.
Again.
I made my case.
Otra vez.
And I drove by myself with my little Nissan from the south route.
No.
Yep.
Across the country?
Without having anyone here. So,
have you ever been to California before that?
For an interview, and it was like, and done. So I didn't know what Southern California was, what it meant. I knew like Hollywood was here, but that was it. So no friends, no contest. I just follow a vision.
Oh.
And that was it.
Wow. Okay. So then here you are, 2015, 2016. You land at UCLA. Bam. What next?
So what came next is that I accepted the fellowship to be a clinical fellowship. I always knew I wanted to be a researcher, always, because I love the nature of asking questions.
And what does a researcher do for people who don't know?
Yeah, so basically, we just ask questions.
To regular people.
So yeah, no, basically.
Patients.
So when we talk about research, a research is that you observe something in your environment and you have a question about why is that happening? What are the factors contributing to what I see in my environment? And then what are the interventions so we can fix or intervene in what I'm seeing in the environment that needs change.
And in your case, what you were seeing in your environment was
a lot of injustices with our Spanish-speaking communities. So one aspect that we all notice and continue to notice is that our Spanish-speaking Latino, Latina, and Hispanic communities come to the healthcare services way too late in the disease course.
Okay.
Unfortunately. So when we talk about early detection and prevention, our communities are not.
Why?
At that time, I didn't know. A few years later, I can tell you, having so many amazing partnerships, is that it all depends on the resources that you have, right? So if you coming from a Latino, Latina, and Spanish-speaking community with higher SES, more...
What's SES?
Social economic status.
Oh, okay.
So more
educated people.
More educated, have access to healthcare.
Better food.
You are more equipped with the language of how to advocate for yourself and your loved ones. So our these sub-communities within our community are able to get in.
Earlier detection.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And they still encounter a lot of discrimination.
Okay.
And I know because I have that.
Right.
Yeah.
You're seeing it every day.
But when we're talking about our communities that are oppressed by so many systems, they don't even know where to start.
Jesus.
Right.
So you have lack of quality healthcare. You have lack of understanding the language, lack of good food, lack of money, lack of all of it.
Right. Right. So for example, for someone, like I remember those cases where for our communities coming from Bakersfield to Westwood, right? Because they see that their parents are having some cognitive changes, right? So that's a commitment, but that's when all the resources are exhausted and they're able to find us. And this is not changing, unfortunately, right? So our community is coming sicker later in the disease, and it's not their fault.
No.
Because we hear that narrative pretty often, is even if they're accurate in conveying the system, like the symptoms, they will report that the doctors did not believe them and disregarded their concerns, right? But they are the authority. So what do?
You trust the authority.
We trust the authority. So I became really angry, really, really angry, because it was injustice after injustice after injustice. And after being later diagnosed, there's not much you can do. You can still have a fruitful life and so forth, but in terms of planning and making sure that everything is in place, not much. So this is where I moved from being a clinician to start forging my career as a researcher, asking the questions like, what is it that our communities are facing that are putting them in these places? Because I refuse to believe that our communities don't care about their health.
Of course.
So that's where that was the beginning of my research career.
Okay. And then so just for people listening who aren't in health and who are raising maybe older family members, or everyone's older population are aging out, just taking it now to the medical side of it, what are some signs people should start looking for in our communities who maybe don't have access? How can we educate maybe the younger people who are helping their aging parent or grandparent? And what would you recommend they do now that they've heard this? What questions should they ask? What can we do?
No, absolutely. And that's also part of my research, because that's exactly what communities were asking us when we started this journey with my lab in 2022.
Mhm.
So they were saying, okay, doctora, now that I know that these symptoms, like for example, I'm having difficulties finding the right words, I'm getting lost in familiar places, or my loved ones are repeating themselves too much, or they're having visions and fighting with people that are not actually there. So where do I go? What do I say? And in terms of how we have developed the interventions, it's like, as I said, research question, you see something that you don't like, you ask the question of what are the factors contributing, and then an intervention so you can modify it.
Mhm.
So then one aspect that me and my team develop is we use what medical providers ask, because I did it as a clinician. So you will use all this information to empower yourself to understand that you're the expert on your body. So you know best, right?
It's true.
You know best. So in within the context of healthcare, and for those that have to go through primary care first, they don't have a lot of time just because of health insurance and the
Of course.
right. So you have to be direct. So we said, okay, so you're going to take basically a diary, and you're going to write down everything that you see, you hear, you smell, you everything, because everything that we do in a daily life is data.
Yes.
So you're the expert, you have the data. So you're going to create like a case study experiment. And they say, okay, on this date, I saw that I misplaced this item. And then we want to engage with onset. When did the thing started? Progression, how is it progressing? Is it stable? Is it declining? Is it zigzagging? Because all those little details convey different possible causes of the cognitive changes in memory, in personality, in language that the person might have. And then you arm yourself with all the ammunition where the physician cannot dismiss you.
Right. Like I have the data right here.
It's right there. You don't have to tell me, like I already, and
You don't have to go home and wait and see.
No.
Here it is.
Exactly. So you don't get dismissed and we develop a whole pamphlet that asks the question so the not participant, but the population and the community members can write it down, and then just send it to, like, give it to the provider.
Oh, wonderful. Okay.
Yeah. So when we do engagement is with the intentionality of early detection, prevention, because one narrative that we continue to hear is, if I have memory problem, does that mean that I have dementia, right? Which means that the marketing and public like PSAs have been working.
Yes.
But now every time that we're having a memory problem, it's like, I'm demented.
Yeah.
What is this? And like I said,
because I kind of have memory problems. Sometimes I'm going to tell you right now. So we should talk.
Me too.
Give me that pamphlet.
Right. So, so then so it means that the narrative, the messaging, the public health messaging that works.
It's working.
But now,
what do you do with it?
Everyone is so scared because it's like, wait, do I have dementia? What is happening?
Yeah.
So now we are having that conversation of understanding all the medical and emotional and life experiences factors that can impact your memory.
Right.
Because if you don't sleep, it impacts your memory.
Right. I mean, yeah.
If you don't drink water, it impacts your memory, right?
Yeah.
If you have problemas con los tiroides, the thyroid, it impacts. If you have sleep apnea, if you snore.
So it's not necessarily dementia. There could be other things.
It could be dementia in the future, but at this moment, the rationale is, if you can find all the factors that are impacting your brain, and then create a plan to sleep better, eat better, move, do all the recommendations. The hypothesis is if if it's not a neurodegenerative process, it should plateau or you should improve.
Okay.
But if you do have the Alzheimer's disease in the brain and you continue, despite modifying these factors, you're still declining, this is where we need to have the conversation
Got it.
that something else is happening.
Okay. So, and I mean, this is such a whole other like universe we could talk about,
Mhm.
but I appreciate that you've given people just facts and practical tips that they could take home.
Mhm.
Anyone watching this,
Mhm.
please, like there's no shame in it either. Let's talk very quickly about the mental health taboo. I think, do you think it's changing in our communities, the way we see mental health?
To be very candid, yes.
Mhm.
In the sense that every time that I'm with community and community engagement and be with communities is core to my lab. Puede ser en inglés, it can be in English, it can be in Spanish. Regardless of the community, they all want to know more about mental health.
Okay, wonderful.
And now more because the pandemic happened. And this is where a lot of decline in our mental health collectively and individually happen. So now they are more vocal about asking, what can I do to support my mental health? And that's a great question to ask because the science is telling us that trauma, PTSD, anxiety, depression are a risk factor to dementia in the future. Because when we are like with anxiety and trauma, unresolved trauma, the body gets inflamed, right? That's where like the skin rashes come, the tension in the neck,
Panic
right?
attacks.
The panic attacks. So it means that your whole fight or flight or freeze system is overreacting. So it means that it's releasing more cortisol, right? Which is good when you have a threat.
When you need it.
Right. But when you have too much cortisol, ironically, cortisol attacks the hippocampus.
Right.
And the hippocampus is the areas that form new memories. Alzheimer's attacks the hippocampus too. So then if we have all this chronic stress due to discrimination, racism, all the isms, chronically, now the science is telling us that constant exposure is impacting our hippocampus and increasing our odds of developing dementia in the future.
Jesus. Well, okay. So, and I'm speechless in that. What do you do with all that? Because it is so beyond us, and you're a champion in the community. You are out there being an advocate and speaking for people who literally do not have the voice, the language, the words, the way to even describe their symptoms. You're out there researching and figuring out a way to do that for them. So that's beyond.
Thank you.
What can we do just as a community and as people in our own homes to help or to, I don't know. Yeah, I guess really help the aging population, or maybe not even aging because it starts earlier on, right?
All of us.
All of us. When would you say it starts happening?
Something that I've been noticing is that when middle school or even now.
Middle school?
Now is younger because the younger generations are more attuned to mental health, right? And now we have a technology world where bullying is still chronic stress.
So they're getting exposed to it much earlier through the technology. Stop.
So now in terms of mental health, we don't, and I was telling this to a community stakeholder recently, we actually don't have a longitudinal study, like study that across the timeline, lifetime, to understand chronic stress from childhood to aging. We don't have that study just yet. Maybe it will be funded in the near future. But based on what we're seeing in our different communities, children are dealing with mental health. The way that they communicate are very different from the way that communicate express themselves from the trained psychologists, counselors, and therapists. So you have a huge disconnect. And that's if they have access to them. And if we're talking about our older women, that's my community, they were raised in a different era, right? So it's more like you sacrifice every single part of yourself for your family, and that is something beautiful until it wears you down and increases your medical conditions, right? And something that I've been noticing is, as we know, everyone has trauma.
Yeah.
Or traumas.
Yeah.
Right? And it was put under the rug, right? Because that's the way, that's the like,
toughen up.
You know,
you're stronger than that.
Y sigue andando, right? But trauma will always find a way to come out, right?
Yikes.
So when we're to your point, youth are more attuned to mental health. The moms are trying to understand themselves to help their children. And then you have the grandparents that are doing their best, but they don't even have the language because they were not taught how to talk about, oh, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. Like, no, tú no estás deprimido. What are you talking about? it's
nothing's wrong with you.
That doesn't exist,
that's
right?
Exactly right.
So we know that in terms of something that I've been seeing in communities, that we are more open if we are in a safe space where we can be authentic without the fear of being judged for just showing that I'm struggling.
Yes. And that's it.
That's it. Because it's like, oh, tiene que ser fuerte. You are a strong woman. I say,
no.
Yes, we are.
That we don't.
And at the same time, we are dealing with a lot of oppression. So it's okay to break, right? But if I break, please don't judge me. We are awful at taking care of someone with a mental health breakdown.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah.
Been there, done that.
Yeah.
Right? In the sense, like, I have my breaks.
Yeah.
And even psychologists don't know how to manage it.
Interesting.
So imagínate.
Oh my gosh. Well, I can't. And so I applaud you, and we could talk and I would love to have you back and talk more specifically about specific topics. But I think this was a first beautiful conversation starter, because the mental health and Alzheimer and dementia conversation is something, fortunately, that is becoming less taboo, and something that we all should be very educated about, just for ourselves, for our family. And it just helps, right? And there's nothing to be ashamed of. And so I applaud you so much for doing what you do, for your journey, for being our voice, for being our advocate out there in our communities, truly. And I'm so proud to say that I know you and to promote everything you do. And so how can people follow along your journey and all your information?
Absolutely. So you can find us. The name of my lab is Equity for Latinx Hispanic Healthy Aging Lab.
Wow.
Right?
We'll write it out. Don't worry. We'll put it in the caption.
So it's in Spanish, it's called ELA, the ELA Lab.
ELA.
Right? And it's in honor of my grandmother, because her name, que paz descanse, is Estrella. That's why my name has double L as Mirella.
That's it.
So that was...
That's it. You win. Get out.
So we are... we have our social media, and because we're talking about brain health, cognitive resilience, emotional resilience. So you can find us in Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Threads. We're about to launch our own podcast in Inglés and Español, because something that we know is that when our communities have access to one of us, it's more like, please tell me everything that I need to know, right? And it's like, how do we find creative ways to disseminate the information, but super real?
Yes.
Right. So it's like, my mom told me that I needed to say háblame claro. Like, háblame claro, no tabus.
Just give it to me straight. Let's go.
Don't try to BS me. It's like, why is it that we are a higher risk of Alzheimer's? Why is it that Latina women are higher risk of Alzheimer's and we don't know why? Because there are no researchers that look like us in those positions of power, and the funding doesn't come to us. It comes to the white, non-Hispanic community, so they study us. No. So we're like, no. So in terms of, so that's why I'm like, okay, podcast, YouTube. All of it, because we all need to be part of this conversation, whether you have a family history of Alzheimer's or not. What we know is that all the risk factors are accumulated throughout life, and middle age is the crucial age or decade where we either tip or are resilient. So for those of us that are in our middle age, right, this is the time to scan, stop, reflect of what's the life that you want to follow, because what the literature is saying is that the lack of sleep, the stress, the hormonal changes, menopause, all of it is changing our brain, our bodies, and increasing our risk of having Alzheimer's in the future.
It makes sense. But one thing we can do is learn, like you said, stop, scan. Where are we? What kind of life do I want to live? Because we can actually make the changes every day now. There you go. Okay. So please, everyone, do follow the page. We're going to, in the caption, put the name. You can follow along, join the podcast, educate yourself. Education is the greatest equalizer. We know that. And representation matters. And there's no better proof than the doctora. Thank you. Muchas gracias. I really appreciate you.
Thank you.
And we'll have you back soon.
Absolutely.
Gracias.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.